Intrepid adventurers George and Nico become embroiled in another mysterious quest as they venture far from the safety of civilization into the heart of an ancient darkness.
Oh, and that's not all. We're going to be poisoning a rude art critic, also forcing an innocent guard dog to take a swim, and maybe using a barrel as a lethal weapon. Then destabilizing a small South American country with some unofficial help from the CIA, while carrying a dead worm and some lingerie around for most of the game. You know, for reasons. All of this is to try and prevent a powerful ancient god from destroying the world. Your normal adventure game kind of stuff. So Broken Sword 2 The Smoky Mirror is the follow-up to the cult classic Broken Sword Shadow of the Templars, made by Revolution Software. And while not on the same level as the first game for reasons we'll get into, is still a pretty fun adventure game. That still has unique characters and humour, though let's say the adventure is more condensed this time around, which makes it feel a bit smaller. With puzzles that have their ups and downs on the moon logic scale. Most are fine, but one or two you might need to prepare yourself for.
Get ready for some serious moon action.
But thankfully there's no goat puzzle this time, though there is a goat in this game, just to keep you on edge.
Now, I like most animals, but experience had made me wary of goats.
I'll also chat about this game's original version versus the remaster, which this time around I have less complaints about, and will show off bits of both. So we started with George and Nico visiting a professor named Ubier, while getting flashbacks to a Mayan ritual of some kind. The reason we are here is because Nico is investigating something to do with a Mayan stone, but as her and George get escorted inside Ubier's house, things quickly go south with George getting knocked out and Nico getting a blow dart to the neck. All while it becomes clear the Mayan ritual is pretty much going the same way as the one in the Temple of Doom movie. Om Nam Shiva, Om Nam Shiva, Om Nam Shiva, Om Nam Shiva. Nico gets kidnapped while George gets tied up and left with a dangerous looking spider. Oh, and the room gets set on fire too. And so the adventure begins. This start isn't too bad and is pretty exciting, but to me it's not quite as good as the one in the first game. I mean, it's kinda hard to top a clown blowing up a cafe in Paris, which instantly raises so many questions. I kinda get what they were trying to do with the intro, with the cross-cutting between the Mayan ritual and the visit to Ubier's house. It does a decent job of setting up the mystery, with the match shots going back and forth implying the past is going to repeat itself. Though to me it would have been stronger if they just stuck with the present day stuff, as the ritual scenes, while entertaining, kind of feel like they aren't really adding much to the mystery the game is trying to set up. It's a bit too much on the nose. Like we get enough hints that some parts of Mayan culture is going to be involved, with George mentioning the Mayan stone and the blowpipe being used to kidnap Nico. But that's me nitpicking though, overall it's a good start. At least they didn't add extra stuff like the first game's director's cut did. Oh god, that mime. This remaster for the game stays a lot closer to the original, which in my opinion is a good thing, as last time the new and old bits of the game were clashing a lot. Most of the changes are visual tweaks, like being able to play the game in widescreen and the UI being easier to use, with some modern conveniences added like a hint system and diary to remind you where you are in the story. Also, to prevent some pixel hunting, all the interactable stuff now has little animated indicators called hotspots on them, which I'll admit helped a lot with a certain puzzle involving Canadian maple syrup, but you can switch it off if you don't want it. Oh, and they made it less likely that you'll get lost in this one jungle section of the game. All of these are good changes. And like the first remaster, there is new art made by Dave Gibbons, but they keep it to a minimum with just new character portraits, and an optional new comic you can read as a preview to the story. I do wish there was an option in the menu to add or remove the new portraits, as the different art styles to me still don't go together. Again, nothing against David Gibbons, he makes good art. It's just the Disney style animations and drawings to me don't mix with his stark comic book art style. I'm aware it might not bother anyone else, but one of the reasons I first tried Broken Sword was because it caught my eye with its visuals. When it comes to adventure games for me, the way the game looks play a larger role in enjoying the game than most other genres, as the interactive bits are a lot less than other types of games, so it's got to lean in hard on its looks to get me to feel something or immerse me in it. That was what was so good about playing Broken Sword back in the day. It gave the same vibe and quality of peak animated movies from the 90s while letting me play through it. But that same reason I liked it is probably what made it so difficult to make, as making good quality animation isn't cheap. Which is one of the reasons Smoky Mirror was made on half the budget of the first game. The other was most of the publishers making games in that era decided that 3D was the future of gaming and all this 2D stuff was now old and no longer worth making. And time has proven that isn't true. If you look at modern releases, there's lots of games using a 2D art style or emulating 2D art with 3D tools that do fairly well. Though back in the 90s, games weren't really seen as art, just software, which led to game publishers seeing whatever is new is just automatically better. And it's still a problem now, but I think people are starting to see that you can improve things without having to throw out everything that was done before. And maybe revisiting some older games and seeing what worked, which could lead to bringing back some great stuff. Anyway, back on topic. So, remaster or original? You can play either and still have a good time. Though the original isn't going to hold your hand when it comes to puzzles, and will maybe be frustrating to get into for newer players, but it's worth it if you want to see what it was like to play way back when. There's even a graphics quality setting if you want to see what a peak potato PC in the mid-90s could do. Though if you want to play a more modern version, the remaster has some nice improvements without altering the original vibe of the game too much. I would have liked more options for things, but it's a lot better than what Revolution did with the first game. Visually, both the original and remaster are solid, though there is a slight downgrade from the first game's cutscenes as they aren't quite as cinematic, but they still maintain that distinctive Disney-esque quality to them. Also, gameplay sections still look great with interesting character designs and some nice backgrounds that have nice details to them that make you want to explore each bit of it, which is thanks to Revolution keeping the same artist from the first game. The music is still good and generally keeps the chilled mystery vibes going and helps to give all the different places you visit a unique feel to them. There aren't as many tracks as the first game, but the ones that are here are pretty fun. Like this one song that plays in Quarramonte, which is basically a soft-spoken local version of Frank Sinatra's My Way. Or the playful bit of sea shanty music that plays when you chat to Emily in the Ketch Museum. And this very energetic organ music coming from a treehouse in the middle of the jungle. But the best is the credit music, which is my favourite in the game. It's this chill Caribbean steel drum music with lyrics that are somehow a little more profound than you'd expect them to be. The only issues I have with the game's audio is the mixing is a bit off to me, but you can adjust in the settings for both versions of the game. And the other is with the voiceover, which is great for all the characters and still has a fun bit of cheesiness to it. But why has Nika's voice actress changed? Like, the person they got to do it isn't bad or anything, they're doing a good job. It's just that it was noticeable to me that something was different about Nika, and it did change the vibe of her character a bit. Like, she is one of the leading characters in this series, so it's a bit odd they switched voice actors, and it did lessen the immersion of the story for me a little. Because I kept having this nagging thought in the back of my mind while playing, why does Nika sound so different? Anyway, the goofy interactions between all the characters are still pretty fun to experience, even with a few changes. With it being very hard to resist not talking to each person you meet about every item in George's inventory, even if it's probably very inappropriate to do so.
Would you like a dog biscuit?
Would you like a smack in the mouth, Chico?
Though this is an old school adventure game, so nearly anything goes.
Nice buns.
The other 90s aspect of this type of adventure game is the puzzles, which are mostly fine, as the majority have a bit of logic behind them where I think most people would figure them out, though there are some puzzles that do go
Bang! Zoom! Straight to the moon.
Especially one where you need to find a cave using a creative combination of objects. It's nothing on the same level of the first game's goat puzzle, as you can brute force your way to figuring it out by throwing stuff together. It's not terrible, but it's one of those puzzles you can get a bit stuck on, which slows the game's pacing to a crawl. Which, if you combine it with how easy it was to get lost in the zombie island part of the game, made it even worse. Though, like I mentioned earlier, in the remaster they did make it so you don't get as lost as easily in this section. And also thanks to the remaster, one puzzle that I really struggled to figure out was made a lot easier by just knowing that I could pick up this freaking pot of maple syrup, which is a pixel hunting nightmare in the original because it's surrounded by other objects you can pick up. I feel like that was designed on purpose to slow players down in this section, since the game is a bit shorter than the first. Though only a little, which is kind of amazing since the game was made in only a year and on half the budget of the first game. But it does show in one part of the game where you randomly find a film crew on an island that's apparently uninhabited.
There ain't no zombies on Zombie Island. At least, not anymore. It's uninhabited.
It feels a bit like it was added to slow progress and not really add anything interesting to the story. Like, I know this kind of stuff is expected in adventure games from the era, and I did enjoy some of the humor in this part, but it feels like there was a bit too much focus on slowing progress instead of making a fun creative puzzle or creating an interesting moment that added to the main story. Which is all the stuff that contributed to the decline of these type of games for a long while. Like, they were never really gone, just not as popular as they once were. And there was a bit of a revival a few years back with some old school style adventure games, but that didn't last because they didn't really try to fix or work around the problems from the older titles. But at least the indie adventure games took note and have tried to get past these problems by really going hard in the stories or trying something different with how you interact with the world. I mean, a lot of walking simulators are kind of just point and click adventure games from a different perspective, if you think about it. But back to this game. Most of the enjoyment I got out of it was in the story, which if I remember correctly, we left off where George was dealing with a house fire and a big spider wanting to give him a hug with their fangs. But we deal with the spider before it gets a chance to be too friendly.
Maybe I'd been a little heavy-handed, but it was a question of survival. Of course, I was still tied to a chair in a burning house with no means of escape.
George is just being dramatic. We get out of the chair easy and get a chance to snoop around. While doing that, George has a sip of tequila where he almost swallows a worm, and obviously we pick it up for reasons. I mean, I was kind of curious what puzzle this dead worm would work with later. Oh, and George also goes looking around in Nico's purse.
It was a stylish little canvas number containing a lipstick, a handwritten note, and a pair of nylon panties with a large love heart emblazoned across the front. It occurred to me that Nico's tastes must have really changed while I was away. Well, they could be useful.
He's not wrong, they do help picking up a hot cylinder that's needed to put out the fire. But he does still keep them while complaining about how they look, and the game gives the option to keep showing them to complete strangers for most of the game. Which should give you an idea of what George is like. He's practical, is a bit of a creative thinker, but also still very nosy and a hoarder of weird items, and also a little odd and petty on occasion. Anyway, time to bust out of here. We investigate around the house and find a newspaper referring to an eclipse happening in Mexico, and review some of the stuff we found in Nico's purse.
I guess I had no business reading the note, but I figured it might give me a clue to what Nico was involved in. It was from Andre Labanau, the history student Nico had known at college. The letter was sentimental mush, and revealed that the exotic lingerie, as he called it, was a gift from him. It gave his telephone number.
Oh yeah, Andre again. He's trying really hard to get with Nico. He's still more of an annoyance than an actual rival though. But he also might have an idea of what's going on, so George gives him a call.
Hi, Andre?
Who is this?
It's George Stobart, Nico's boyfriend.
Don't you mean ex-boyfriend?
Look, I didn't call you just to pick a fight. I need to talk to you about Nico.
Can't you accept she's just not interested in you?
Listen, Andre, we need to talk. Nico's life depends on it.
Okay. You remember the cafe at Montfaucon?
Sure. Andre?
Okay, so he's pleasant as ever. Anyway, we head to the cafe in Montfaucon, which is a callback to the last game, though this time we aren't going to be exploring the sewers for secret Templar meetings. Good times though.
You're all going away for a very long time. And you can just drop those guns. You're impressing nobody.
This time, just a casual chat with an old retired French policeman who we ran into in the first game, while waiting for the perfect chance to steal his flask of absinthe. And since the game is from the 90s, it makes absinthe sound like a super dangerous illegal drink, but it's available in most countries nowadays. Though it is a very strong type of booze, which is probably why people saw green fairies while drinking it. Andre eventually arrives, and he and George argue a bit before talking about why Nico wanted to visit Professor Hubier.
Drop it, Andre. Right now, Nico's in danger, and we have to work together.
So, how can I help?
Nico needed to speak to Hubier about a stone.
Oh, you mean this stone?
So that's what all the trouble's about.
Precisely. Nicole told me to guard it with my life.
Well, it's worth more than that, surely.
Oh, very funny.
George tries to ask Andre for the stone, but he wants to hold on to it for Nico, though he does tell George that she got the stone while looking into smugglers, and that a friend of his who owns a gallery might know more about Mayan artifacts. What's happening with Nico though?
I've had enough of your games, Kala. Tell me what you've done with my stone.
I thought your business was simply smuggling cocaine, Karzak. Why are you so interested in that stone?
Either you tell me what I want to know, or Pablo here will make you talk.
Well, George better hurry before things get worse, but before he leaves the cafe, he makes that old cop depressed, and steals his flask of absinthe only for good intentions, I'm sure. We then make our way to their friend of Andre's art gallery.
The Glee's gallery had style and class, but very few customers.
Talking to a few patrons, we come across this critic who has strong opinions about most things. And when George shows him a pot that, by the way, he stole from Professor Hubier's house, the critic calls it ugly and just drops it on the floor. George takes this personally and maybe starts thinking of revenge. But before that, we need to focus on finding Nico, so we talk to the gallery owner.
Are you Mr. Glees, the owner?
Yes, sir. May I help you?
You're English?
These days one prefers to think of oneself as European.
Well, that's not going to work out so great in the future.
This gateway is very, very well organised.
Anyway, chatting with the owner, we find out that he's done business with Professor Ubia before, and has gotten some artifacts from him in the past, through a shipping company at the docks. They wants to keep his sources secret, and doesn't want to tell us the name of the company. And when we try snooping around the back...
Excuse me, sir. That area is private.
Oh, so I'm not allowed back here?
No, sir.
Well, it looks like it's time to create a distraction, and maybe get revenge. So let's spike the critic's drink with something a little stronger than he's used to. While the owner mourns his broken pots, we sneak into the back and find a label for the shipping company Ubia uses. It's not a strong lead, but it's the only one we got. So George heads to the docks. But there's a problem.
What's the big idea?
I don't know. The dog went berserk for no apparent reason.
He's trained to do that.
He also tries to fool the guard into thinking he's making a delivery.
Are you gonna let me make my delivery?
Not without the paperwork. You get the papers, you make your delivery, and I get a fat backhander.
I was getting nowhere with the story about being a trucker.
Well, that didn't work. Maybe a bribe of some kind?
I have these very exotic panties.
Take them away, you pervert!
Okay, even though the dog is just doing their job, George's only solution is to get rid of them. So, doing some sneaking around and smoking at the guard, George manages to get some dog biscuits and finds a pole with a hook, and gives the dog one last treat before he goes to sleep with the fishes.
As I'd expected, the dog could swim like a dog.
Okay, so George gets away with attempted murder on that one. It's kind of a recurring thing in the series that George isn't great with animals, and I think it's because they sense the looming danger he poses to them, like when an earthquake or a storm is about to happen. Anyway, at least now we can get over the fence and snoop around that shipping company's warehouse, which turns out to have the guys who kidnapped Nico in it.
Hey, you make any more noise, I break your arms.
That bully needed to be taught a lesson.
Garzak's already mad because we didn't get the stone. You give me any trouble, I'll tell him it was all your fault.
Karzak? That must be his boss.
Okay, so we are on the right track and found out some guy named Karzak is the guy behind things. Now we need to get in. So what ingenious creative method does George come up with to try and get in? Well, knocking on the front door and saying he's delivering pizza.
Pizza delivery?
I didn't order pizza.
No? This is the Condor Transglobal Shipping Company, isn't it?
I don't like pizza.
Oh, come on. Everyone likes pizza. Maybe he was allergic to mozzarella.
What's actually more surprising is the guy doesn't recognize George from earlier in the day when he knocked him out and tried to kill him with a spider. You'd think that would instantly make the guy run out and try and get George, but no, George needs to threaten him in order to get him to come out.
If you know what's good for you, you'll open this door.
What if I don't?
I'll kick your head in.
Okay, I'll come out, you creep.
And you'll never guess what happens. Okay, actually George does have a bit of a creative way to deal with this guy, and that's by assault with a loaded barrel. Time to head into the warehouse. In there we find a key, and that the shipping company had been transporting things from Quaramonte City in Central America. And then we stumble across another kidnapper.
Whoa! Don't shoot! The little guy had a blowpipe. That confirmed my suspicions about what had happened to Nico. I waited for him to shoot me, but it didn't happen. Instead, he seemed to want to tell me something.
Yeah, it turns out he wants the key to free himself, as he was an unwilling partner in crime, it seems. Though he quickly runs away once he gets it.
Hey! Come back here!
Looking around some more, George eventually goes upstairs searching for Nico, and after puzzling around a bit, finds everyone's favorite mystery cliche.
Please be a secret door, please be a secret door, please be a secret door. Yay!
This leads to Nico, who's pretty happy to see George. And after getting her loose, she gives us more background about her investigation, which at first was looking into Karzak for smuggling drugs. But then she came across this Mind Stone he was trying to get hold of, and wanted to find out more about it from an expert. That led to Professor Hubier, who seems to have a connection with Karzak, which resulted in all the murder attempts and kidnapping. She isn't sure how the stone fits into any of this, though we might want to escape before Karzak or his thugs come looking. Also, better grab that weird statue that was with Nico, as a souvenir. While brainstorming with Nico on our way out, we found out a bit more about that small guy we freed.
Well, what about the little guy?
I don't think he knows where he is or what he's doing here. The big guy, Pablo, he brought Titipoco from the jungle.
Titty what?
Titipoco. That's what I heard Pablo call the dwarf.
Okay, moving on. With some help from Nico, we break open a door by destroying a potentially priceless statue.
Great teamwork.
Nice to be working with you again, Mr. Stobart.
And make a dramatic exit. So that should be enough if you want to play the game for yourself. I'm going to be talking spoilers now, which if you want to skip, go to here. Or you can stay. You've come this far already. Don't you want to know what happens with the ancient god wanting to destroy the world? No? Okay.
Josh, where have you been?
Back at the art gallery, we bump into Andre, who Nico convinces to give the Mind Stone to George. Karzak is going to be after them now though, so they need to figure out what's going on with the stone and why he wants it so bad. And the only lead is Quaramonte City, so time to catch a boat.
Quaramonte, the traveler's rear entrance to Central America. Well, that's how it was translated in the brochure. We didn't know what we were looking for, but the offices of Condor Transglobal seemed a good place to start.
The first thing that really worried me when getting to this part of the game was the goat. Which if you've played the first game, you'll know why. Luckily there isn't a puzzle or any shenanigans involving it, but if you give it a lump of coal, you might get a surprise.
What was that? It's a lump of lucky coal. Coal? I would have preferred chocolate.
Anyway, talking to the locals, you don't find out much at first, apart from when you show them that statue you got when rescuing Nico. They really don't like that thing.
Do you recognize this statue?
Si, senor. It is very, very bad luck. That is Tezcatlipoca, the night hunter.
Though we do run into some familiar faces, as the same American tourists who might have been working for the CIA in the last game are also here.
Are you still working for... you know who?
You know I can't talk about my work, George. That's between me and Uncle Sam.
Apparently Mr. Henderson wants to free a local mine worker who's in prison for saying some subversive stuff about the local government. He even brought a truck filled with nitrate fertilizer that he intends to use as a bomb. You know, the typical well thought out planning the CIA is known for when messing around in Central America. Though we can't get sidetracked by that. George investigates more around town and finds out that someone behind the scenes has been trying to get a local mine closed for some reason, which is really annoying the mine's owner. And then when we stumble into a local police station, we overhear this.
I have done just as I have been instructed, Professor. With the mine closed down, there'll be no one around to observe your excavations. Ah, I have visitors.
Just remember what I told you, General. There's really no need to make a martyr out of that man.
Well, that's pretty suspicious. George tries to talk with General Raoul, but he seems only interested in Nico, and doesn't really share too much information. Also, he doesn't want us looking at the map on the wall. Though he does tell us that the guy he was talking to before was Professor Hubier. Oh, so we finally get to meet this guy and ask him some questions.
What do you know about my girlfriend's abduction?
I don't know what you're talking about.
She was invited to your mansion in Paris.
Not by me, she wasn't. I haven't been home for nearly 7 months.
Hubier might not have been involved in all that, though chatting with him we find out he is here in Quaramonte because Karzak is paying for his expedition, so there is a connection. And whatever the stone is linked to might be on the map we can't get a look at. We also get more of an idea what Tezcatlipoca is.
Can you identify this statue, Professor?
Oh yes. Tezcatlipoca, the Lord of Darkness.
A Central American god, right?
A supreme deity. Tezcatlipoca means, literally, smoking mirror. There. You see the mirror shield in his left hand? The Mayans believed he could look into the mirror and see into the hearts of men. He was the wind which came howling in the night in search of victims, and victims they gave him by the thousand.
Human sacrifices?
Men, women, children, animals, anything that bled. The steps of his temple ran red with the blood of sacrifices. The Mayans have a legend that says he'll return one day.
Well, that's some strong foreshadowing. We better get a look at that map. George comes up with an idea to get rid of Raoul so he can gain access to the map, but Nico isn't gonna like it.
Could you distract the general while I took a look at that chart?
You're kidding. Did you see the way he was leering at me?
So with very little convincing, George gets Raoul to do an interview with Nico, while also getting rid of the general's assistant for a bit.
It looked like a geological survey map showing the land to the southeast of Cuaramonte City.
However, trying to find out more about the mine from the prison in the back gets George caught, and Nico's got her own problems to deal with.
The stench of cheap cologne rolled over me like tear gas.
So, what do you want to know about me?
While keeping Raoul busy with small talk, his mom makes an entrance.
Mom!
What is going on here?
Nothing, Mom. I was...
I'm in uniform. And when I'm in uniform, it's...
Madame la Presidente. Sorry, Madame la Presidente.
Yeah, that's right. His mom is president of Cuaramonte, and probably the one making deals with Karzak. She questions Nico for a bit before deciding she would be a perfect wife for her son. Geez, that escalated quickly. And back at the prison, George gets a bit of unofficial help from the CIA.
Hey! Psst! Hey, George!
Remember that fertilizer bomb? Mr. Henderson wants to use that to break George out.
Dwayne, listen to me. You'll kill all of us.
Luckily the bomb is a dud, so we go with plan B, which is to use the truck to collapse the prison's wall. Nico is also in a dangerous situation, as Mama President wants her son to propose to Nico right now. But a crashing sound in the distance distracts them long enough for Nico to make an escape. With plan B successful, George catches up with Nico.
George, what have you done? You only had to sneak a look at the chart, and it's turned into World War III.
They manage to get out of Dodge by catching a boat leaving the city, but a helicopter sent by Madame Presidente catches up with them and blows up the boat. George survives and starts searching around trying to see if Nico made it, when he comes across a tree house with organ music in the middle of the jungle. Using some pretty dangerous methods, he manages to get the owner of the tree house's attention.
I'm Father Hubert. I don't suppose you speak French.
Huh? Why do you want to know that?
I found a young woman with a fever by the river this morning. The poor girl is close to death, and there's nothing I can do for her but pray. I don't understand her, but I think she's speaking French.
Hang on, that must be Nico.
Turns out Nico isn't doing so great. She was bitten by a snake and needs a cure. The priest knows of locals who might have a route which can help her, though he's very reluctant to show George the way to the village because of what happened the last time he went.
Yes, I'm ashamed to admit it, but I found myself doing the monkey dance.
Oh no!
George does remind him that Nico's life is on the line and does convince him to take him. And after some negotiations with the village guards, George gets to talk with the shaman and tries to convince him to give them a medicinal root to help cure Nico. The shaman says he'll give it to George, though he needs to listen to a story that's linked to the main reason he's here.
Many years ago, when the world was young, the great god and king Quetzalcoatl was defeated by trickery and deceit. His enemy Tezcatlipoca took his place as leader and demanded terrible human sacrifices. A group of loyal priests found a way to trap Tezcatlipoca. But his powers were so great, they knew he would not remain trapped forever. His time of incarceration would end with the eclipse, which marked the close of the Fifth Age. So the priests fashioned 3 obsidian stones which contained the power to seal the mirror for all time. But before the stones could be put in place, they were seized by the invading Spanish.
George isn't really convinced by the story, which is kinda odd. I mean, he did stop Neo-Templars from using ancient powers to take over the world fairly recently. Though he does think that these stones are part of whatever Karzak is planning, so asks the shaman where the 2 other stones might be, which the shaman gives some strong leads on. One stone was taken by an English captain called El Draco back to his homeland, and the other was stolen by a pirate named Ketch, who retired and bought an island in the Caribbean, as one does. If George can get all the stones and bring them back to the shaman, he'll show him what to do with them in the pyramid where Tezcatlipoca is imprisoned. But let's get back to getting the root for Nico.
Now do I get the root?
Here, take it. Make haste if you wish to save the girl's life. The hummingbird sings to me of death to come.
Now you're talking in riddles again. Listen, is it okay if I crash here? I've got no chance of finding my way through the jungle in the dark.
You're welcome, but you probably won't get much sleep. Tonight's the night of the monkey dance.
Rushing back the next day, George manages to get the root medicine to Nico just in time.
Here, drink this.
Oh, George, it's horrible.
Just swallow it down. You'll need all your strength when we go after the other 2 stones.
Other stones? What other stones? What have you gotten me into now, George Stobart?
Deciding it would be best to get a hold of these stones before Karzak does whatever he's planning, George and Nico split up and each go after a stone. George traces one to Ketch's Island and Nico goes looking for the one the English captain took, which is most probably in the place where the English like to store all the international stolen goods, the British Museum. Back on Ketch's Island, George gets blocked from visiting the Pirate Museum by the owners, a pair of old ladies who are descendants of Ketch, and insist he wasn't a pirate.
Well, if he wasn't a pirate, what did they hang him for?
Envy. Pure green-eyed envy. He had been a successful privateer, you see, and had accumulated great wealth.
As rich as a mink in a paddock.
Shut up, Mina.
The house is closed because it's getting renovated, but the guy playing the makeover, named Bronson, seems a bit dodgy. So after some shenanigans and a bit of help from Rio, a local fisher boy, George exposes Bronson's scam and gets access to the house.
Hey, cut that out, you crazy old bat!
It's kind of funny that the Pirate Museum probably has less stolen treasure in it than the British one. Speaking of which, Nico finds the Jaguar Stone in the museum and while chatting to an attendant about it, runs into a familiar face.
Professor Roubillier.
Eh? What? You 2 know each other, do you?
It's very suspicious him being here, but he claims it's for business reasons before leaving in a taxi heading for the docks. And when the attendant tries to show the Jaguar Stone to Nico, they find out that
it's gone. Some sods avenged it.
The attendant insists that everyone not leave the building though. So Nico looks around, finds a key, and borrows an obsidian dagger. I mean, it's only fair. Ubia got to take something home. She also manages to distract the attendant long enough to escape the museum and track Ubia to the docks. Though while that's been happening, George has been doing some serious investigating.
2 bells and all's well.
Pirates were cool.
While looking around, he does find a slightly annoying child.
What the? Who are you?
I'm Emily.
What were you doing in there, Emily?
Hiding. What are you doing here?
Grown-up stuff.
Grown-ups? Pfft, I'm never gonna grow up, I'm not. You shouldn't be here. What's your name?
I'm George.
Pleased to meet you,
George, does some messing around and finds a map along with some clues that could lead to the stone he's looking for. And finally finds a use for that worm he's been carrying in his pocket for most of the game. Though these series of events do lead to him tricking Emily into giving him her priceless family heirloom. It was probably stolen to begin with anyway. Though it does lead to him figuring out where the stone might be.
That must be it. Ketch's Treasure Island.
Uh-oh. That's Zombie Island. It's a bad place.
It's fine, I'm sure we can convince Rio to take us there.
Would you take me to, Zombie Island?
In this weather? You're madman.
On the island, George explores the jungle and does the one puzzle in the game that requires the most moon logic to solve, and finds the location of the cave where the stone is hidden. But before he gets there, he gets distracted by a film crew whose main star is a satirical take on young actors from the 90s.
Hi there, George Stobart.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Haiku McEwen.
You're playing Jim Hawkins, right?
Jimbo. I had Mr. Hawks change his name.
Jimbo Hawkins, right.
It's maybe mocking Keanu Reeves. I mean, his acting in Bram Stoker's Dracula was a little iffy. But the rest of his stuff from the 90s was pretty great, I think. Anyway, the way George decides to make progress in this section is by nearly killing an innocent stunt double by getting some hornets to attack him. Yeah, well, that's the hero of our story. At least he does eventually find the stone. Back to Nico, who has followed Ubia's trail to the docks and finds another familiar face.
I knew I'd found the right ship as soon as I saw Pablo at the rail.
It should be pretty easy to sneak aboard and... let's try that one more time.
Okay, fine, I'm cool, I'm fine.
Okay, for real this time.
Got you.
So taking a peek through a porthole, Nico finds Ubia and Karzak chatting with each other. Ubia has the stone for Karzak, who he thinks wants it so he can use it to scare the locals at Coromante, but actually Karzak is a true believer in Tezcatlipoca and wants to get rid of the stones. He even gets visions from him.
I have seen him in my dreams. We have spoken of his plans for this world. We have spoken of your part in these plans.
My part?
He told me you would be useful. He told me how to crush your spirit by turning you to drugs.
My wife died. You know that full well. She was my world, my everything.
And now, you are no longer useful. She called out your name as she died, you know.
What? What are you saying?
And then they thought you'd done it. It all worked perfectly.
You? It was you? You bastard! You monster! For the love of God, Karzak!
Which one?
That's a pretty good villain one-liner. I think that's the reason he goes outside to Pablo to brag about it. This gives Nico a chance to sneak in and get the stone that Ubia still has in a death grip.
It was the Jaguar stone, alright.
Oops, I guess Karzak finished bragging to Pablo. Time to use that dagger from the museum and make an escape. Heading back to Coromante, Nico gets a letter from George telling her to go to the village where he got the root. Though when she arrives, she finds the village has been burnt to the ground and signs that George was here.
These sunglasses are George's. George, where are you? Titipoco, I'm almost glad to see you. You little asshole!
I know the top suspects are supposed to be Karzak or maybe Titipoco for the burnt village, but with how George does things in this game, I wouldn't put it past him either. Anyway, checking around with some help from Titipoco, Nico finds the third stone.
I recognize that. It's the Coyote Stone. I had the Coyote and Jaguar stones. Titipoco had the Eagle, according to the shaman. That's all we needed to deal with Tezcatlipoca. Pity he hadn't any ideas for dealing with Karzak.
This is when Titipoco shows Nico the way to the pyramid where George has been captured and looks like he's going to be sacrificed to Tezcatlipoca. The thing is though, it doesn't seem like everyone is on board with the plan, as Raul is acting really nervous. George even starts suggesting that Raul might end up in the same spot as him because of his mistake with the prison.
I'll bet I'm not the only one due for the chop around here either. Hey, Raul?
I'm warning you.
Raul was a bundle of raw nerves. I hoped George wouldn't push him too far.
Nico and Titipoco manage to cook up a distraction that gets Pablo away from the pyramid and gives her a chance to sneak up on Raul.
Drop the gun or I shoot!
Please, don't hurt me!
Don't worry yourself, my finger isn't loaded.
She tries to talk some sense into him about helping to start an apocalypse and also lets him know that Karzak murdered Ubia when he was done with him. Though he still thinks his mom, El Presidente, won't betray him.
Mother would never betray me.
Oh, I'm tired of trying to reason with you, Raul.
Nico frees George, so the whole gang runs into the pyramid to try and escape, while also trying to figure out how to stop the ritual. She also gives George one of the stones for luck, and obviously not for plot reasons. And after fiddling around with some levers, they manage to go deeper into the pyramid. Meanwhile, outside Raul's mom arrives, and they have a heart-to-heart talk about him not agreeing to the plan. You know, to release an ancient god who could trigger the end of days. His mom has a reasonable response.
Fine, we're still a sacrifice short. See, the eclipse begins. Pablo, kill him! This Tezcatlipoca can feed upon his yellow heart.
Nico was right all along, but it's still not too late.
Come on then, Pablo. Let's see who sacrifices who.
Back in the pyramid, Nico needs to do a long, drawn-out tile puzzle to get further in, but there is a way to skip it, where Nico uses her assets to get past without needing to go through all that. I know this is a joke solution, but I do like the idea of being able to solve problems in multiple ways. If more adventure games did this, okay, not specifically this solution, you know what I mean, it would maybe help with reducing the moon logic in some puzzles in these types of games. I wish I had a better example to show, but like Nico, we gotta work with what we got. Anyway, back to George and Titipoco.
So I thought
This is it, you know? This is true love. Anyway, I have to leave for a few weeks, and when I come back, what do I find? Damn right. And with who? Labano, that creep.
So they are stuck trying to find their way through the pyramid when George decides to mess around with another lever. You'd think you know what would happen after the last time he helped Nico mess with one.
Nothing's happened. Oh, I hate that. Don't you hate that? Titipoco? Oh my...
George lands mostly intact and goes deeper into the pyramid until he gets to the central chamber and gets the stone ready to do whatever it's gonna do. Now this is when the game fumbles a bit for me, as the ending feels very rushed when compared to the first game, as we just get a cutscene that has some very questionable parts in my opinion. Like in the first game, we finally got a payoff of confronting the bad guy and one last quick thinking puzzle to save the day. Here you don't really confront Karzak, you just watch him do the ritual. Also, there's a little leap in logic as Nico just automatically knows what to do with her stone, so George and Titipoco just do that. But how did Nico know to put the stone there? It doesn't even look like it fits. And it's not a hard problem to fix, just show Nico looking at a drawing on a wall in the pyramid at some point showing what to do with the stones. Easy. They do at least add some drama to it by blocking George from putting his stone in place and having Titipoco being too short to get to his, with Mama El Presidente trying to stop him. But somehow Raul survived fighting Pablo and comes to save the day by helping to get the stone in place. While Tezcatlipoca arrives through the mirror, which vaporizes people outside the pyramid and gives Karzak his reward, Raiders of the Lost Ark style. Though laying loose all that power removes the rocks George was having problems with, so he slaps in the stone and banishes Tezzy back to the Mayan Phantom Zone. And then the story just kinda ends with the gang happily staring into the sun like half of America did during that one eclipse, and the last scene being a grumpy Tezcatlipoca stuck in the mirror before the credits roll. It's an okay ending, but I have so many questions. Like, what happened to Raul? Did he die off screen or something? And did that energy explosion thing just kill some people around the pyramid, or was it the whole world? And also, why are they staring directly into the sun? Like, this game is clearly rushing towards the end, as the details and some of the logic are not really there. And it's more like this needed to be done in the quickest way possible, and this was it. Remember, this game was made on half the budget of the first, so it's not like 100% Revolution's fault. It's great to know publishers have always been making these great decisions. And because of this, it's not a very satisfying ending. The first game did it better, though it is slightly made up for by the great credits music.
Happiness is an inside job. If your name is Mary, if your name is Bob.
Brokensword 2 in either its original or remastered version does have a fun and interesting story, so you can't go wrong either way. It's got goofy humor and characters that might make you question their intentions and morals, but it's entertaining to see what happens. Though it's not quite the same level as the first game in the series and has a few issues here and there, which contribute to making its world feel smaller. But I'd still recommend giving it a go. It has its own unique charm to it that's worth experiencing if you enjoy adventure games. Also, with a reforged version of the first Brokensword game coming out with all its nice improvements, maybe that does well, which could lead to something similar happening with Brokensword 2, and it gets a bit of attention where it needs it to really make it shine, like I think Revolution wanted it to, and maybe that can rub off on future games in the series. Okay, end of video stuff. I should have mentioned this months ago, but I keep putting it off. But if you really like the videos and want to go above and beyond just liking and subscribing, you can now throw a super thanks my way to help support the channel. No pressure though, just watching and liking the videos is great by itself, it's just extras. But anyway, thanks for watching, see you next time. Boo.